And once again, welcome back as we're moving right along. It's our Wednesday edition, and what would Wednesday be without the great Ken Bombace, one of our newer contributors, but he's not so new anymore. He's piling up the weeks, helping us with tremendous background. Ken has a tremendous background in criminal intel, military, you name it, Ken has done it. It's always great to have Ken on the show. Ken Bombace, my friend, how are you?
Hey, Tom, how are you? I'm calling in from Miami, and there's lots going on with the election coming.
In Florida, I mean, down there in Miami, you seeing stuff going on?
Miami. I'm down here on business, but I wanted to make time to call in. There's so much going on right now with the election coming and just other things in the news, too.
Yeah, then there is. You know, again, this election starting a year ago, of course, there was a lot of excitement to begin with because it's kind of nice to see somebody run for governor that's right in our backyard. You know how I always say, if you see them on the Sunday morning at the Sunday morning bagel store, that's a good local official for you. And, you know, you're not going to ever see your governor at the bagel store, but if you live in Suffolk County, you might catch the Republican candidate for governor. And the way it's starting to shape up and the fact that the Democrats, the opposition party, the party that are a bunch of crime deniers, and not all of them, but the movers and shakers of the Democratic Party are the crime deniers. We saw that last week with the Hochul-Zeldin debate. People are starting to raise their eyebrows and say, you know, I want to make a shift. And I think that shift is based on something close to you, the criminal justice system, as it is with myself. And that's where I have the excitement. Finally get a hold of a system that has been out of touch since that horrific day in Minneapolis and going back to the George Floyd incident, that it turned us all upside down. Ken, your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, that's what started it all. Tom, horrific event.
Yeah.
But what followed in there is, I think, a completely irrational response to what happened. And they demonized the police across the country, defunded the police, or many people promoted defunding the police. And then what followed also was bail reform. Many reforms took place that do not support our law enforcement and also have drastically impacted crime fighting in America. I mean, the crime is spiking across the country, specifically in urban areas, and in suburban areas. And it's all almost entirely in direct response to those policy changes that took place following that. So, I mean, if people are paying attention, people are watching the news and have been, you know, it's really hard for the Democratic Party right now to separate themselves from this nationwide crime spree, essentially, that we've seen, because it's directly in relation to the policies that they support and that they've doubled down. They haven't backed off. You know, Tom, I think I mentioned this last time we spoke, but, you know, the bail reform that took place was a disaster from the beginning. It failed immediately. But rather than cut your losses and say, all right, let's make some changes, this obviously is not working, they doubled down, and now we're going into the midterms, and they're trying to backpedal and say crime's not that bad. I think it was a tremendous mistake, and it may cost them the majority.
Well, that's where the phrase crime denier comes in. And when Kathy Hochul looked over Lee Zeldin and said, what is the big deal with this? You know, it's not so bad. And even Eric Adams, who's been a disappointment, he said the same thing. 3.5 million people ride the subways, and there's 6 felonies where people get pushed, beaten, punched in the face for no reason, because we have these people out there that really should be locked up, whether locked up in our local jails, Rikers Island, or even in the mental institutions, and they're out there hurting people. But he said, well, if there's 6 a day and 3.5 million people ride the subway, that's not so bad, except if you're one of the 6. Okay. Or not only that, if you're one of the family members of the 6. But I first of all, I reject that whole statistic that he's given. It's a lot worse than that. Ask any NYPD officer and what they're putting through right now. So I worry about our people. I worry about people that are law-abiding citizens. Look, you devoted your career to that. Essentially, when you're a cop, you care about people. You're there to protect them. You know, the moms and the dads and the brothers and the sisters and the husbands and the wives and the boyfriends and the girlfriends, all they want to do is live their life. They don't want to be interceded by evil. And that's where, look, you've arrested hundreds of people. in your career. You know what evil is. You know these are bad people, that they need to be incarcerated. And all you have to do is look at the YouTube channel or watch Court TV. I watch a lot of Court TV, and I watch that Nicholas Cruz and the evil that was there, or that other guy, Darrell Brooks, the one who ran the people over on that in Waukesha, Wisconsin, when they had that Thanksgiving parade. These are bad people. These are people that need to be incarcerated. So what do I end up doing? I worry about our cops. And I guess today I'm a little sensitive to it because the New York Post released that video of the Newark cop getting shot and lying there in a pool of blood on a street by himself for a few minutes until backup got there and civilians came to help him and so on. That's who I worry about, Kathy Hochul. And I wish you would watch a video like this. Go ahead, comment on this because I'm going off on a tangent and I'm just angry. I'm just angry about all of this, you know? Go ahead, Ken.
Well, you're not alone, Tom. I think the country is angry, that the least of which is our law enforcement community and their families they're outraged by the treatment that these officers have had for so many years and the negative sentiment that's been directed towards police for so many years now and has been not just ignored, but even supported by so many politicians that have caused this situation that we're all in right now. And, you know, for Kathy Hochul to come out when she was debating with Lee Zeldin and make a comment along the lines of, you know, all you want to talk about is crime in New York City. Why is this so important to you? It's so important because it's out of control. It's so important because people are afraid to take the subways. They can't even travel or move around the city safely. That's why it's so important to them. And it's not just New York City. It's all around New York State that we're seeing these problems. You know, right in Suffolk County, we see the same issues we're facing. Just today, or it was actually last night, I think, the district attorney announced that they made an arrest in relation to the shooting that took place at Lee Zeldin's house. You know, and not to mention, he was also the victim of a crime during his campaign, the actual candidate for governor. I mean, doesn't that tell you something that there's a problem in this state right now? And I think that, like you were just saying, so many people are outraged, and I think we're going to see that at the polls, not just in New York, across the country.
Right. You know, and I get the example, certainly, Lee referencing, and we read about it in the media, his twin daughters. They were sitting there doing their homework. There was a bullet that landed 30 feet away on their front lawn. It was lodged in the fence or something. 30 feet away is not a lot of distance. In terms of what's happening in this country, is that people are shooting a lot at each other because of the gang violence and so on. So it happened on his front lawn where God forbid, what could have happened there. And I don't even want to mention it, but what could have happened, to those beautiful kids of his? I mean, my God, as far as Kathy Hochul's concerned, to say, why is it a big deal? It's a big deal because my family was in jeopardy in a suburban neighborhood that you would never think that or never even consider that. You know, so, again, when we hear and we see close to 10,000 people showed up in Hauppauge the other night, when Governor DeSantis came down to rally for Lee Zeldin and the Republican ticket, it meant something to people that were there. They were relating to each other and what their concerns were. So this is a whole different type of feeling out there. You could talk about their issues. I mean, Joe Biden is going to try to bring back the threat to democracy, and they want to bring back Donald Trump. You know, I don't think people are that stupid anymore. I'm telling you. Ken?
Yeah, I think, Tom, that there's one thing that's alarming, even leading up to a midterm election, is there's no factual basis that's required for the statements that are being made. Like they're trying to relate this person that had the incident that attacked Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, to January 6th.
Yeah, right.
Anything they can right now, anything they can possibly do right now to try and survive these midterms. I think it was Governor Hochul says that, actually the statistics show that crime's higher in red areas or red cities. And it's simply, there's no facts, there's no stats that support that in any way. But they throw it out there. It's like right now the strategy seems to be do whatever it takes. We got to try and salvage this election. We could backpedal later. And nowadays it's not even backpedaling. They just ignore it. They just ignore it. They don't respond to the accusations, criticisms, and there's no one's held accountable. So it's really like a free-for-all out there. But I think right now things have gotten so bad with the economy, with fuel costs, with crime, with the border where we have criminals and terrorists and fentanyl flowing across the border. All of these policies, I think that everyone is catching on across the country, and you're probably going to see that in the midterms. Definitely, I think all the polls are showing that it looks like that Congress is going to go red, and the Senate is going to be a little tighter. It could go either way, I think, at this point. But we'll see what happens as we get closer. I think Americans are tired of what they're seeing. In fact, I think a poll just came out that shows Lee Zeldin 2 points ahead of Kathy Hochul. And in New York State, that's amazing.
Yeah, and that is amazing. You know, you mentioned Paul Pelosi, very interesting case. And this is how I view it, and then I'm very much interested to see what you have to say about that. I view it that we have an overabundance of really deranged people out there. We really do. More so than we had in a long time. And when Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice, his life was threatened when they had a guy on his lawn that wanted to kill him and his family. And the guy calls his sister, and his sister talked him out of it. So Brett Kavanaugh was under threat, and we've seen that happen. We've seen representatives on the Congress like Maxine Waters, screaming about that if you see any Trump supporters in a gas station or a restaurant, or any of the administration in a restaurant or a gas station, to attack them also. You know, we have seen this political violence from these deranged individuals come on both sides, and I don't pay it no mind. I don't think it's any real conspiracy. I think what motivated the Paul Pelosi attacker was no different than what happened to Brett Kavanaugh. And then you had the Republicans practicing for a softball game, and a man arrives with a gun and he shoots Representative Scalise. He injured a few other people. He was shooting on an open field. You had members of Congress of the Republican Party scattering in all directions. If it wasn't for the Capitol Police taking charge and taking the guy out, who knows what would have happened. And sure enough, they bring these people in. Well, I love Bernie Sanders, and I had to shoot Representative Scalise. I don't pay that any mind. Bernie Sanders did not want violence at that softball practice, just like any more than Republicans. Kevin McCarthy wanted to see Nancy Pelosi's husband attacked or hurt, or the same thing with Pelosi herself, Speaker Pelosi. I don't pay it any mind. But yet the talking heads on the Sunday morning talk shows, and I'm going to pick up Don Lemon, because thank God CNN took him off his nighttime program and put him on at 6 o'clock in the morning so he can't do any more damage. He got into this big thing with the governor of New Hampshire, Sununu, because Sununu basically said that these are individualistic attacks by deranged individuals. And Don Lemon said no, that this is coming from the Republican Party and attacks towards Democrats, and he dismissed the Scalise shooting. He basically said, well, as far as I'm concerned, that wasn't anywhere near of the fact of what the MAGA people are doing in terms of promoting violence. That's the problem. And I believe that is the problem. When you have people like Don Lemon that have that, and I'm bringing him out on this radio show today because I think what he said was outrageous. Because this is what promotes the violence, that it almost becomes okay from the left to promote it that way. And I know I spoke too long, but can't go.
No, this is great, Tom. You hit it right in the head. And, to suggest as an example that this individual who attacked Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, to suggest that this person did what he did because of a Republican or conservative narrative that's out there, it's insane. It's ridiculous. This person, first of all, is living in San Francisco. He's a nudist. He's a documented Barack Obama supporter. But most importantly, he's clearly unstable and mentally unwell. To suggest that Republican narrative or a conservative narrative is what caused this person to go do that is ridiculous. But they're looking for anything that they possibly can. There's, of course, an underlying problem, and it's part of the crime problem, too, of people who are unstable on the streets right now. This person with Paul Pelosi, He's here illegally. He's not supposed to be in the country, but they're not allowed to get rid of him because it's a sanctuary city. So, they kind of created their own problem right there with Paul Pelosi. There's so many facts that lead to this not having anything to do with the Republican Party, but they're looking for whatever they can. That's dangerous. That's dangerous to try and get these things. Everyone who watches it and sees that individual and what he did understands that's an unstable person. This is not a political issue. And it does not serve our country well to draw that, to try and dot those lines where you're saying, hey, yeah, this was directly created, this problem, by the Republican Party and the conservative narrative that they put forward. It doesn't serve us well. There's many problems that contributed to that guy doing what he did, and that's not one of them right now. But again, it's desperation, I think, on the left.
And what Joe Biden is going to do today, another speech at Union Station talking about the threat to our democracy, just like the neo-fascist MAGA, which I really reject, because I think MAGA and the use of that word is a term, Make America Great Again, that symbolized a movement in this country that I believe brought some good out. Now, obviously, when Donald Trump was president, he did some things that were very popular in terms of on the economy and the oil production and so on. It made people feel, okay, we're on the right track on a lot of this stuff. But it was certainly the media that wanted to bring down the other image of Donald Trump that I believe guided the people into the divisiveness that we have right now in this country. But there's an election happening, and it's happening in 6 days. And the great Ronald Reagan always said, there's nothing wrong with this country that a good election can't cure. But do you believe that even though there's going to be massive change, and I certainly feel it, New York has certainly got me really excited. I don't know what's going to happen in New York, but in any case, there's a very real possibility. Do you think it'll go towards a direction of doing away with that great divide that exists right now?
The divide, I don't see that going away anytime soon, Tom. But to your point about New York, I feel that so many people I've spoken to, and I've spoken to people on both sides, a lot of people, it has gotten so bad in New York, especially in New York City, but New York throughout the state with the policies that exist, that so many people I've heard say, if Zeldin doesn't win, then, I think I got to get out of here. I've heard so many people say that. It's powerful for people to say, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. The state's going downhill in such a robust fashion that if this is the last chance we have at saving the state. I've heard a lot of people say, you don't hear that every election. And to the other point that you made earlier with January 6th and President Biden's going to give a speech, and it's going to be a lot about democracy is at stake. I think that's dangerous, where it's overplayed now. It's like white noise. Constantly, everything's like, you have to vote. It's almost like scaring people. You have to vote for us, or our country's over. And, to suggest that January 6th, where we had hundreds of people go into this place, it was hours long. It was a bad thing. It was something that should not have happened. I don't know not one person that thought our country was at risk of being taken over that day. Not one person. Because, and then, however, to say that and constantly push that narrative and then ignore the better part of a year of civil unrest like we've never seen in this country that cost, billions of dollars in damage, people murdered, police officers murdered, so much looting and damage to businesses, small businesses destroyed, police stations taken over, the capital zone of a city taken over, things set on fire, police cars overturned. To suggest that you weren't concerned about our democracy then, but you were worried about that day, with the guy with the moose horns who came into Congress, bad thing. Should never have happened. But does anyone really think that our country was almost taken over that day? I don't think so. I think it's that's why these hearings are still going on, because they're trying to stick to that. That's all they have right now. And say, look, forget about the economy, forget about crime, but democracy is at stake. If you don't vote for us, then we're going to lose our country. That's kind of the narrative.
And that's it. Ken Bombace, we're going to talk to you next week. We'll be doing a post-mortem on the election. It'll be an exciting show. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on.